Chair, we're now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this remote meeting of the Outer North East Community Committee. My name is Councillor Norma Harrington, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. The Outer North East Committee covers all Woodley, Harewood and Wetherby wards, and is a committee where ward councillors and interested parties have an opportunity to discuss and make decisions about services and priorities for the local area, and also consider funding applications for community projects and youth activities. I'd like to start the meeting today by confirming that the Community Committee meets the requirements of the Council's constitution, even though members and other participants are in remote attendance, and that members of the public are able to view the meeting via the webcasting. As we begin the meeting, could I ask all attendees to mute their microphone unless I invite them to speak, and this will avoid disruption from background noise. And I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves and mute your microphone once you've introduced yourself. And I'll start with Councillor Neil Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. You took me by surprise there. Neil Buckley from Woodley Ward.
Okay, Councillor Dan Cohen.
I had the heads up, you're going in alphabetical order there. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dan Cohen from the Woodley Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Harrand.
Peter Harrand, also from Woodley Ward.
Councillor Sam Firth.
Hello, Councillor Sam Firth, Harewood Ward.
Councillor Matthew Robinson.
Councillor Matthew Robinson, Harewood Ward.
Councillor Alan Lamb sends his apologies but may join us later. And Councillor Linda Richards.
Councillor Linda Richards, Wetherby Ward.
Thank you. And the officers who are attending this evening are Sam Cosini.
Thanks, Chair. Sam Cosini, Parks and Countryside Commercial Manager. I do apologise as well. My camera is a bit finicky on this laptop, so I do apologise if it's not on.
No, it's not. we'll listen to you, Sam. It'll be okay. Preet Cundy.
Preet Cundy, Communities Team, Localities Officer for Outer North East.
Okay. Grace Young.
Grace Young, Communities Team, Support Officer for Outer North East.
And John Grieve.
Good evening, John Grieve, Governance Services, and I'll be clerking today's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I know it's easy, Chair, to forget your favourites, but I am here. So,
sorry. I ticked up. Sorry, I went past you. Sorry, Ryan.
It's all right.
Yeah, I got ahead of myself with my little pen ticking everybody off. Thank you. Right, so Clark, so John, do you want to carry on with the first items?
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press and public. Item number 3, late items. With no late items, but we have circulated some supplementary information in respect of the finance report, 2 additional wellbeing applications.
Okay, thank you.
They were sent out a couple of days ago. Apologies for absence, no apologies for absence. I'm aware Councillor Alan Lamb has got another meeting, and I think the intention is he'll join us after that.
Yeah.
Under item 5, could I ask any members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests?
Oh, yes, Liz.
Right, no members have indicated any disclosable pecuniary interests.
No. Okay.
Moving on to agenda item number 6, this is the open forum. We have received one submission from Fauna Parish Council who have expressed concerns about the way police have changed the way they report crime figures. Are you happy for me to read out their submission?
Yeah, just to also say that Liz Jarman has joined us as well this evening, so she's here too. Welcome, Liz.
So I have circulated this submission to members possibly about half an hour ago, so it has come to you as an email. So this is from Fauna Parish Council. Police have changed the way they report crime figures. Instead of receiving a monthly report of crimes in the immediate preceding month, we are now referred to crime mapping function of the Police UK website. Statistics do not show the detail that is helpful when assessing the extent of local crime. For example, a search of the crime database for Thorner on 17th of November 2020 shows 3 crimes reported in September. 2 were violence and sexual offences, and the 3rd was other theft. These are quite meaningless statistics. More significantly, the meeting of the Parish Council on 6th of October confirmed there were no crimes reported for September 2020. There was no more recent data on the database. If a crime is to have any relevance, it needs to be up to date, and we need details of the offences. If there was a serial rapist on the loose in September, we really need to know whether these offences are continuing and whether anyone has been caught. I'm also aware that residents reported several incidents of antisocial behaviour in the relevant period, yet these do not appear. We would also like to be provided with details of road traffic accidents within the parish so that the causes can be considered and any road maintenance or improvement issues identified. That concludes the submission, Chair.
John, this did come up. I'll open it up to ward members that covers Thorner in a minute or two, but this did come up at the Wetherby Pact meeting last week, where parish, and I see Nick Fawcett's joined us as well this evening. Hi, Nick. That parish councillors were concerned about the changes to that reporting, as were ward members. The PC that attended our meeting, PC Gorringe, actually then sent me an email the next day and to all the parishes in Wetherby Ward outlining how you can actually drill down into the information, which will give you the information that you're actually looking for, because I personally had been struggling with finding that, which will be no major surprise to anybody on this call. So I'm quite happy that I will push that information out to all ward colleagues so that you can then pass it on to your parish councillors in your ward areas. And just wondering, I know that All Woodley have got their Pact meeting this evening. We had ours last week, but Harewood, not sure about what happens with Pact in your area.
We've yet to have a Pact meeting, Chair, and I have been asking about this. So perhaps that is a way to address this and take some of this forward.
I hope it would be. We certainly do get quite a lot of information at the Wetherby Pact meeting, and if people do turn up, they can raise those questions there, and it's a very useful meeting, and it probably would cover that kind of issue that this gentleman's talking about from Thorner. So are you going to take that forward with the police then, Matt?
I will do, yes. Happy to take it forward and happy to look at some of this with them. I think the road traffic accidents point that's made is a slightly more difficult, but happy to try and address that as best as I can. Yeah,
I guess that the police said that they report that their reports link in with the highways department's reports that monitor accidents. So there is a kind of dual reporting there. So you should be able to get it from one of them. I think we were going to go to Nick Barras in highways and see what they could do to actually give us that information, if that's helpful. Okay, so I will send you out that information that we received in Wetherby Ward, and then you'll have it for all the wards across the area. Okay, thank you. There was another submission which was from a lady who was a member of a bowling club in Hare Hills. Having spoken to Councillor Cooper and Liz Jarman and a couple of other people, we've decided that the community committee, as I said at the beginning, is to deal with things that are issues within our 3 wards. As the proposed closure of the bowling green in Hare Hills is not actually within our ward, we're suggesting that we can forward that submission on to the consultation process, but actually it's something that should be taken up with the ward members for the area that either the bowling club is in or that the resident is in, and that isn't the case for this particular submission that we've received. And I know that John is actually going to write out and give that advice to the lady. Okay, so moving to item number 7, please. Looking at minutes of the previous meeting held on the 20th of January. Do members accept these as a true and correct record? I think we did look at them at the previous meeting. Yeah, nobody's saying no. And then there are also the notes of to note the minutes of the Outer North East Consultative Forum, which was held on the 14th of September. You've had those minutes as well. Are we happy to do that? Yes, okay. So are there any matters arising from the minutes? No? Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to now, we're going to sort of shuffle the agenda slightly, and Preet is going to move on to the finance report. So you have all received the finance report, and so it'll be questions if you have any, and then the main points that Preet needs to raise with us this evening. Thank you, Preet.
Thank you, Chair. In the first instance, I will just go through the funding applications which need ratifying at this meeting. They've already been discussed with ward members either through email or in the ward member meeting. So if I just go to the first one that's mentioned in the finance report, then I'll discuss the ones in the supplementary information. So the first one is the Weatherby Christmas lights. So that's 5,000 towards this project. And are all the councillors in approval? Okay, thank you, Chair. And then going on to the supplementary information, the first project is for Alwoodley Ward, and it's the Santa's visit, and that's £1,000 towards Moortown West Residents Association. Are all councillors in approval?
If I might, just to be clear, I won't be taking any part in this decision because I'm actually involved in this particular project. So while I don't have a direct pecuniary interest, I thought it was inappropriate for me to take any part in the decision making.
Thank you very much for that, Dan. I'd just like to say that Councillor Alan Lamb has now joined us. Welcome, Alan. Right, carry on, Preet.
Okay, do you want me to go over the application in regards to Weatherby that we discussed, or are we just happy to plod on?
Just carry on.
Super. Okay, so the last...
Excuse me, we just approved the £1,000 for...
Yes.
We did, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, and the final one is Alwoodley SIDS to be reallocated. There's 8 SIDS which had to be repositioned in the ward, and that is coming at £940. Okay. Are we all in agreement?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'll take any questions if there are any.
Any questions for Preet on the finance report? No. Okay. Nobody's indicating. Okay, thank you, Preet.
Super. Did you want me to mention about the email that's come out?
Yes, please.
Okay. Just to let all the councillors know that tomorrow, if you haven't already, you'll receive an email to say that each ward in the citywide, is receiving an additional £10,000 to be used towards the COVID situation in the ward. So each ward, Alwoodley, Harewood and Weatherby, will be getting an additional £10,000. And there's a time limit in terms of this one, and it's until the end of March. And just to be clear, it's not coming out of the wellbeing pot. This is additional funding that we will be getting from central government.
Yeah, and I've received an email a little while ago, so I will put that out to all ward members either this evening or first thing tomorrow morning, so you'll be able to read the information there. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I think
right.
Councillor Stevenson and Councillor Robinson have a couple of questions.
Okie dokie, Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks, Chair. Can you just give us a bit more information about where that money's coming from then? I know you said from the government, but in what form? I mean, I know we get like discretionary grant funding and stuff like that. So if it's not coming out of the council coffers, what direct fund is it from?
Okay. Shall I answer? Yeah, please.
So, Councillor Stevenson, it's coming from the money that's been allocated to the city as we've been entered into Tier 3. So, so the money's coming from it's been allocated to community committees, so you can use your discretion to help local people from a national allocation.
So, Liz, presumably then, if it's up to our discretion, 2 points. What happens to some community committees that might not use the money? Is it clawed back to central government or the council? And if it's entirely at our discretion, does that mean, for example, we can pick up with support to businesses that have been missed by the council's discretionary scheme?
So, in answer to your first question, the money's been given. It's £10,000 being allocated to every ward, basically. So there's no discrimination in that perspective. With the second question, I'm not sure whether or not we would. I'd need to speak to colleagues around the question about businesses, because obviously the government's got some support specifically for businesses. So this money's the £10,000 is more about providing support to local groups and organisations as opposed to businesses. But I can take that away and come back to you.
That would be helpful if you could, Liz, please. Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. I know you're sending out more details tomorrow on this,
tonight,
but it would, or tonight, or you know, in the next half an hour or whatever. Yeah. And how is this funding to be targeted? Because obviously, if we are told that it is at the discretion of every ward, we're going to be inundated with requests for people that say, actually, I quite fancy a COVID grant for something. And so it would be useful to know that. Yeah. And secondly, I was asking for more discretion about how we can use the youth activity funding earlier in the year. And are we any further in progressing that? That would be useful to know too.
Yeah, and that's covered in the email as well, Matt. I've only read it just before I came here, so I haven't read it completely, but wanted to raise it to make you aware that it is on its way and you need to have a look at it. Liz, did you want to pick up on Matthew's first point?
Yeah, so in terms of the funding, it absolutely has to be able to, we need to have an audit trail in terms of it being linked to local relief efforts. So we can't just totally take on board your point, Councillor Robinson, that there'll be lots of people that will call on potentially local funding. So it's got to be about supporting local groups for local activity that that will really help local relief efforts. So we need to have a clear audit trail for that.
So my understanding of the brief part that I read was that it's not to be used for anything that would normally come out of wellbeing or YAF funding, but it's got to be something that is something to do with COVID, because we're now in this tier 3 situation that we're in. So maybe it could be, I guess, for example, if Maycare wanted to put in for some additional funding because they wanted to do something extra to what they've been doing with their local groups, then that would probably come under that. Is that right, Liz?
Yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing that we'd support, and also things like that you've been doing in terms of supporting local groups in terms of let me think, food banks, and also, for example, IT equipment that's been given to young people to make sure that they can continue to engage in their education and things like that. So. But Councillor Stevenson, I don't think I answered your question completely, but the money at the moment, as far as we understand, is that it does need to be spent before the end of the financial year. So 31st of March is what we're working to, but we are seeking some clarification about whether or not there's some flexibility around that.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I had a second question, which in answer to the first question, which is we might, and I hope and I pray we're only in tier 3 for a very short period.
Yeah.
And if this money is for tier 3 and we go into tier 2, what happens? Because we might only have just set up the protocols for spending it when it gets taken back.
Yeah, Liz, can you find out about that as well, please?
Yeah, I can do. I don't have the answer to that, Councillor Robinson. No. We've been given the allocation that we have on a monthly basis, so I'll keep talking to you all. Is basically in terms of what their situation is.
Okay, I've got Councillor Cohen and then Councillor Harrand. Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. Liz, you just said something that really threw me. You said the sentence, I don't know if that's something we'd support. Now, I'm slightly confused because the words I heard were that it was at the discretion of the local ward members, and unless I've missed something, that's us, not you. So I'm slightly confused as to where we get to, that's something you'd support. I appreciate there'll be criteria that we might need to look at, but who decides? Is it elected members who their local communities have elected to make the decision, or is it officers? That's my first question, if I may.
So Councillor Cohen, this £10,000 being given in addition to your normal money for you to decide as local members what's best for your community. So providing we can have a proper audit trail in terms of how that decision's been made and how it's supporting local people in respect of the COVID issues, then that's completely at your discretion. It is a pot of money for local members to decide how they can support local people around the pandemic.
That's really helpful, Chair. Can I just go with my second question?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. It was when you were saying it was something we'd support. Yeah. I was just trying to get my head around. So thank you very much for clarifying. It is for the local ward members.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
My second question is, in the unlikely event that any of this £10,000 was unspent, is it clawed back to local government, or is it clawed back to Leeds City Council and the council then retain it?
So that's an interesting question, and one that we're also posing to central government, because they've obviously awarded this money to us as an additional allocation, and at this moment in time we don't know. We're working on the basis that we have to spend it by the 1st of March, but we are seeking guidance as to whether or not there's some flexibility around that. So the answer is that I don't have the answer to you at this moment in time, Councillor Cohen, but rest assured that if there's some flexibility around it from a local government perspective and Leeds City Council perspective, then we'll apply that with community committees.
Okay, so I think that was what Councillor Stevenson was asking as well, but you'll come back to us on that, Liz, yeah?
Oh, sorry, I do apologise.
Yeah, it's all right, don't worry. So Councillor Harrand, you wanted to ask something?
What publicity are you going to give to this new fund?
Well, I suppose that's up to you as a committee, how much you want to publicise it. As other members on the call have already said, that it's £10,000 that hadn't been there previously, so there may well be, the more you publicise it, then greater call, there may be.
I understand all that.
It's completely up to Councillor Harrand and your ward members.
So there's no central advertising or press release or invitation to bid or anything like that. It's all up to us.
Yeah, not at this stage. There's different demands in different areas, so it will be up to you as ward members to publicise it as you see fit.
Yeah, there's certainly nothing in the email that says anything about any advertising that's going to be done centrally.
So it's up to us almost to approach people and say, are you interested?
Or maybe that people have already contacted you about something that they would like some money for. Yeah. Okay. So, oh, yes, Councillor Cohen.
Just to say, the one thing I will say is, this is £10,000 per ward. That's £230,000. That's this is something that's I'm really surprised and disappointed actually that the council hasn't been seeing from the rooftops, because that's a significant chunk of extra money that the government's given right down to the most local level. I think it's to be applauded and welcomed.
Yeah,
I'll feed that back in, Councillor Cohen.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz. Okay, so moving on back onto the agenda, if nobody's got any further questions for Preet about the finance, we're happy that we've dealt with everything you need to deal with, Preet, on finance. Yes. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So I'll just give back to the agenda. The local care partnership update is only to say that I have been attending local care partnership meetings in the Wetherby ward, which covers Wetherby and Harewood largely, but doesn't cover All Woodley. Now, the local care partnership team are keen that any ward members who actually want to get involved with their local care partnership do so. So you have an open invitation. So members from All Woodley ward, if you want to go and get involved, if one of you wants to work it out between yourselves about who actually wants to go to that local care partnership meeting and find out what is going on in your area, then they will be really, really pleased to see you. Okay, I'm happy to carry on doing the Wetherby and Harewood bit, but they are happy for ward members to go along, because they're saying that the input that they've had across the city from ward members has been really, really helpful in the plans that they're making. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Is this, when I first was elected, I was on this, and it was Roundhay, Moortown and All Woodley combined together, and whatever the acronym, okay, I can't remember what it was now, but this was what it was. But at the time, after about a year or something like that, it became very much a talking shop, and it didn't really seem to achieve an awful lot. And I think at the time we all decided that it needed to be altered in some way and given some beefed up objectives and all that kind of thing. And nothing actually came of it. So is this what this is?
Yes.
Where,
yes.
Yeah, okay, well,
Yeah.
I think certainly if that was to be beefed up, I'd definitely be interested in going on to that.
Okay, well, I will send you I'll get the details of which area one you can get you're involved in, and I'll send that to you for the LCP. Certainly we were looking at things like they're looking at all sorts of statistics across the ward areas for things like in Wetherby. They were looking at, well, what's the spend for people with major disabilities and how they're actually attributing that money, what the spend is for that particular person. Are their needs actually being met, and are they assessing that? And there's been a lot of beefing up of what the NHS are doing about clarifying what people's needs are and whether the right money is being directed at the right people. But also they look at things like what's happening with the local neighbourhood networks, and I know they're very keen at the moment to look at a transport scheme across the city. They'd done a pilot in Beeston, and they've come and spoken to us at the Wetherby one about the outer areas, and I have said, you need to talk to ward members about that in the other outer areas, Otley as well, because there's very, very different dynamic about how you transport people to hospital appointments and things when you're not in the city centre of Leeds. So they're looking at that. They were also looking at the Bramham House inoculation thing for the flu vaccinations, and they're also the GPs and the GPs Confederation are feeding into the information about the COVID vaccination. That will be the next thing that they're looking at. So there's an awful lot of information that's going, and the information that ward members can give, because we know the local area too, probably better than some of the people that are sitting on the LCP. So my experience of it so far has that there is a great deal of energy and they want to get it right this time, and I would encourage you to get involved. Okay, so that's me as far as the LCPs go. Oh, Dale's got a hand up. So now, Sam, you've been very patient. Parks and Countryside Service, we asked you to come along and just update people on what's been happening in Parks and Countryside through the COVID situation and what the plans are moving forward. So welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just run people through the update, and then I've got just one extra item to add at the end as well, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
So yeah, just to set that context, since the 1st of April, we have had up to 35% of staff off, whether that was due to self-isolating, whether it was due to shielding, and obviously that has limited some operations that we've been able to do. Really, we've tried to make sure that we've kept essential maintenance and reactive work that's urgent up to scratch, but as I'm sure you can appreciate, with 35% of frontline staff not in at certain points throughout the year, that has had an impact. But on more of a good point, we have led the way in some respects, particularly the area which is within the wards. Was one of the first facilities to reopen after the first lockdown, and we've received great feedback from the public about how the area was opened and its approach to social distancing. So it's become a bit of a gold standard for our service and for the other outlets that we have, which has been fantastic for us. And certainly financially as well, to get that back open and generating income going forward, particularly with the way budgets are this year. So I thought that was important to mention. We've also supported local concessions across the city, but specifically for the wards here, we do have a concession in Wetherby Wilderness Car Park, and that's included potential grant funding and a 25% reduction to try and keep them in business, and that's been well received by the concessions, and hopefully the residents will have appreciated that, given that parks and green space were one of few areas allowed to remain open and used during this last year. Another thing that I wanted to put a bit of detail to as well in the update, because it's been quite a significant highlight, has been the allotment usage across the city. We saw a massive spike in people wanting to use allotments, people using their allotments, particularly in the first lockdown. We do attribute some of that to probably the food shortages that were happening in supermarkets, or perceived shortages that were happening in the supermarkets at the time. People thinking, right, what can I do? But also from a mental health perspective as well, with not much else open, allotments certainly have been able to take up some people's time going forward. And I've added some detail. So for Wetherby, we don't have any particular sites, but there are 2 sites managed by city development team. So I've concluded them. So that's Ainsley Crescent and Halfield Crescent. So if you do have any queries about any sites managed by city development, the officer to question is Debbie Kirk on those matters. In Alwoodley, we have 3 sites. So we've got Alderton, which is 10 half plots and 8 raised beds, which is quite a small site for us, but we've got a waiting list of 3 people on that site, so it is full. We've got Deanswood Drive allotments, again 10 half plots, but no waiting list on that at the moment, so there is some availability. High Ash Drive allotments, 15 half plots, full with waiting list of 24. So quite a large waiting list on that when you consider that there's only 15 half plots. It would take some time for those people to get on that. And then there is a site in Alwoodley area on Eckupmore Road that's not managed by us, but is run by the Alwoodley Allotment Association. Harewood Ward, we've got Bunkers Hill allotments, 4 plots of various sizes, 1 vacancy, so again another small site. Beachview allotments off Castle Lane, and that again is managed by Debbie Kirk's team in city development. So again, I think one thing I would point out within that is that there's quite a limited number of allotments within the 3 wards, but that the demand is starting to creep up. So I thought it would be useful to inform councillors of that. The other thing that I would think's worth mentioning, events has been something that's been taken a hit, particularly in 2020, but we are starting as a service to look at taking provisional bookings, depending on how things evolve next year, for events in parks and green space in 2021. So if there's any small galas or activities or fundraisers that councillors you're wanting to get involved with, or they're starting to be talked about, we will hold space for those for you if you get in touch with us now. And then just on, I've got a couple of developments for play areas. So we've got a play area in Shadwell. So they're working on delivery with residents and ward members in Shadwell off Hollywell Lane. And that's a refurb of an existing playground, which is about 30 years old. Consultations complete, and residents have secured some in principle Section 106 funding, but we're still looking at getting some further funding for that as well. But if successful, hopefully the playground will get much needed refurbishment and some potential drain works as well in the field. And Kingley Rec again looking at improving an informal play area there, and that work is due to start any time if it hasn't already. And then just on our operations update, we have started to get some of those 35% of staff who've been off in the last lockdown back into work. Fingers crossed that does improve the amount of work we're able to undertake as a service and going on to next year. I know that particularly this year and in the summer and in spring, bedding and baskets were affected largely, but we'll be hoping to get that somewhat back to normal for next year. Budget actions are still unclear. I know that there's a report for exec board which does affect, I think it's the 16th it's planned to be introduced, and that does affect some of the things with parks. So I'll be interested, as I'm sure you will, colleagues, to see what comes out of that. And in Bloom is part of that. So it was suspended this year, and we currently don't. It will be decided in exec board what the future of that looks like. But the hope is obviously to continue supporting it for those in the area who use that tool and the dedicated officer that we have in place. And then woodland creation has been a big talking point over the last few weeks. It started in earnest, and I've just listed the areas that are being planted. So Lingfield Road, Tynewood Road, Clifford Moor, Westwood Road. And that's obviously started as well. But I am aware that there has been a lot of feedback that's come into the lead project officer for the woodland creation, Victoria Marsden, and she's dealing with that feedback as swiftly as she can, and speaking with residents. But then last but certainly not least, I have been made aware that we've been asked to look at renaming the play area at Deepdale in memory of the late Councillor Wilkinson. To rename that play area to the Gerald Wilkinson play area, and I'll pass to you, Chair, but we're looking for confirmation from the group as to whether that can go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Lamb, would you like to say something about that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we felt it was a fitting tribute to Gerald. It was one of the last projects he'd been working on. We've discussed it with his family, who are really happy with the idea, and also just made sure the Deepdale Community Association and Boston Spa Parish Council are happy. So really, certainly, I think as ward members, we would highly recommend. This is very appropriate, and we hope colleagues will support that.
Everybody happy to support that? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that, gentlemen. That's lovely. And Linda. Councillor Cohen and Councillor Harrand had their hands up. I guess they want to ask a question before they need to depart. Councillor Cohen?
I will defer to my honourable friend.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harrand.
He can't come, so I'll do it for him. The 35% worries me. Is 35% just is that the average or the extreme, or if you had everybody who's been off in the last 9 months and count them all, one eventually gets to 35%? It's the only percentage you mentioned. I mean, what's the average mean there? What's the peak? It seems a hell of a statistic for a healthy outdoor organisation like Parks and Countryside. 35% of what have done what?
Thanks, Councillor Aaron. Basically, that was unfortunately not the peak, but more the average, and we've put that down to quite an aging workforce. The majority of our workforce are over 50, in fact, a large portion over 55. And because other services have benefited from being able to do a lot of work at home, and, you know, being able to take the laptops home, continue working as normal, the majority of our workforce, as you can imagine, they can't. They're operational staff. They're staff that are outside, whether they're maintaining parks, planting, etc. And a large number of those staff came under the shielding categories that were put forward by the council and by the HR, Human Resources Department, and we've responded to that and obviously protected those staff as much as possible as we could. But it was a significant hit for us, unfortunately, and it is a large number. I know it seems potentially too large, but that was the reality for us, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Just one supplement. 35% was the average, was it?
It was the average during the first lockdown and second lockdown, but not during the summer in between.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robinson, you had a question, and I'll come back to Councillor Cohen.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief then. Okay. Sam, you mentioned tree planting. Presumably there is options for bulb planting. There will be locations where trees aren't suitable, but are there viable alternatives being progressed? So wildflower meadows, bulb planting, and that sort of thing. And could you give us an idea, and I appreciate it would not be accurate and you might need to go check it for a final figure, but what's been the loss of income for the area this year in light of COVID and the lockdowns?
Thanks, Councillor. We are looking at different types of planting, and that is being led by Glenn Gorner, the woodland or forestry manager, I should say, sorry, within the Parks Department, and that is all dependent on the types of land, as you've mentioned. Some will be flood risk management planting, some will be bulb planting, depending on the type of land. And we're also more than open to any suggestions from yourself and from your colleagues about any options you think would be worthwhile going forward. We're more than happy to consider that as part of the scheme or as their own individual schemes. And just remind. Oh yeah, sorry. The second question about the area. We've surprisingly done quite well. As you're aware, the area is split into mainly it's kind of plant related commercial activities, and it does have a cafe facility as well. The plant related trading has been probably about the same level despite the lockdown and not being able to open, because I suppose we're still in a growth period, so we are still year on year attracting more business and custom, which has been fantastic. So that is about the same level, Councillor, but the cafe has lost probably about £300,000 of income due to being closed, as it is now, with us still being in tier 3. So I can't narrow it down to the pence, but it's about £300,000.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Matthew.
Just brief supplementary. So by that indication, then getting into tier 2 is incredibly important for this council to get its income up and running again.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd agree, Councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Cohen.
Thank you. When you were going through your lists of schemes, you mentioned the rec on King Lane. Do I take that's what everybody else in Alwoodley refers to as Alwoodley Village Green? Because I don't know where the rec is otherwise in Alwoodley, other than off Harrogate Road. And then my next question is, and is that the extension of the informal play area? Is that the extension of the informal play area that was referring to?
I believe so, Councillor, yes, on both points.
So it would be appreciated if Parks and Countryside could make sure they call it what absolutely everybody else calls it. Just then we all know what we're talking about. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just going back to Councillor Harron's point about the 35% average absence rate. Sam, you mentioned that people were shielded. Does that mean that they were shielded whether they wanted to be or not?
It's a good question, Councillor. And my understanding, while no one in my specific team didn't want to shield, my understanding was that it was suggested heavily that they do, and only in a few rare cases did we have people in who didn't want to. I know it did happen, but it was rare.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if there's no more questions for Sam, thank you very much for your time this evening, Sam. It was nice to hear from you, and I'm sure we'll hear from you again in the future.
Thanks,
Thank
Councillor.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Okay, so the agenda item number 12, because we're back on with where we were, is the Outer North East Community Committee update. Accepting that councillors from All Woodley might need to be going shortly. You're all right for a minute or two, are you?
Yes, we are. There's nobody trying to get into the other meeting quite yet.
All right. So you will all have seen the report that Preet has given. Are there any questions? I'll take them first from All Woodley councillors if there are any questions about the report that you wanted to raise. No. Okay. So are there any major points, Preet, that you just want to bring to our attention, as in one or two main points?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there is one main point that I would like to raise with the committee, and that's in regards to the youth summit that will be taking place next year. I did circulate a proposal, a standardised proposal, and if the councillors are okay, or if they have any suggestions in terms of how they want to modify that or add anything additional, if they could let me know by this time next week. If not, then I'll accept that everybody's happy with that proposal, and then I'll just contact schools accordingly in accordance with the sort of timescale that was actually outlined in the email. So it's just to get any feedback from any of the councillors, if they want to just adjust or if they're happy with how it is, and then I'll go ahead. That's the sort of main point that I'd like to raise, Chair.
Thank you, Preet. Councillor Cohen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. For me, that was the youth summit. Sorry, thank you for raising that, Preet. It's a good template. What didn't come out, unless I've missed it, was what the costings are associated with the youth summits, because they tend to be quite expensive and take quite a chunk out of the youth activity fund, which for me is probably not the best use actually of youth activity fund. So I'd be quite interested to see that aspect. And then there are some tweaks from the All Woodley perspective, certainly, that we'd like to see. And I don't need to go through that with everybody right now. We can certainly take that offline, and then my colleagues would have some comments in that regard as well.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Preet?
Sure. So in the first point, in regards to the cost, I'd probably say because everything's going to be virtual, the cost should be relatively minimal. Because we're asking the school just to fill out the questionnaires. There's not really going to be a venue, and the youth summit, that will just be done through Zoom Pro, where I understand you can have about 100 young people. As a goodwill gesture, we may send out some vouchers that the schools can use towards school if they want to have snacks or refreshments, etc. But otherwise, I'd probably say it would be sort of, there's nothing to absolute minimal.
It's not like the previous amounts that we've paid, certainly for
No,
Hereford
no.
and Wetherby Wood. Yeah.
Okay. If we could just have some absolute clarity, Chair.
Sure.
Previously, for example, officers have charged for time for facilitation. So again, it's just about having absolute clarity as to what the costings are around these forums.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Robinson, did you have your hand up, or were you just moving about? No, that's all right. Okay. I'm desperate not to miss anybody because and now Ryan's no. Okay. Right. So has anybody else got any questions about the update report for Preet? No? Okay, got off lightly there then, Preet. And I would just like to draw people's attention to the Appendix 1, which is the Facebook highlights. I mean, I'm not really sure whether it's good, bad or indifferent. I guess being the 10th most popular community committee page is not so great because that means we're bottom. It's very nice of you to say the 10th most popular, Preet, but maybe we could do a little bit more to try and get people aware of those Facebook pages. Yes, Councillor Firth and then Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there is one problem that I realised, that there is no link to the YouTube broadcast anywhere, I believe, on the council website or on our Facebook page, for example. And as a result, I also think there's a general point. I'm getting a bit confused by the council's general policy, and maybe this is something that either Liz or somebody could pass on, that there's 2 YouTube channels and one keeps having other videos at which for committees, which ours is on tonight. And then there are other community committees that are on the main Leeds City Council YouTube channel. I don't know why there's a mix between the two, but it seems to be a bit confused. And I think there's just a general point that maybe we need to think about how we can broadcast it a bit more on our Facebook page for the next meeting, either be it through that we might even want to put some paid advertising, but at the same time, I think maybe promoting it a bit more in our groups could be something that we look at in the future. But for the first meeting, I appreciate it's teething problems that we've had.
The appendix I was referring to was about the actual usage of the Outer North East Committee Facebook page, Sam, but that's, I take the points that you're saying there. Andy Booth, you're actually on the call. Would you be able to respond to any of that Councillor Firth raised?
Yes, I can, Chair.
Thank you.
Just the issue regarding the 2 channels. We have to broadcast on separate channels sometimes to prevent overlap of meetings, because what happens when they collide, it will switch one of the webcasts off, which we found out unfortunately during a planning meeting. Those meetings are subsequently put into the same channel so that they can be found on the same place on YouTube after. But as you said, I think there is still some teething problems and some trial and error for our webcasting all these.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay, Sam?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think
you.
there's a general point about promoting our Facebook page, which could be done, but
Yeah.
we'll think about that separately.
Yeah, I think it's ward members might be able to push it out in their own areas. Councillor Cohen, you had your hand up.
Just to flag up, Chair, that we all do have our own, of course, Facebook pages.
Yes.
You know, Woodley, for example, has our ward Facebook page with around 4,700 residents on it. And so, you know, I think we can take comfort that we are socially media-wise very popular, even if the council-run webpage, less so.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Anybody else got a point they want to make? Yes, Liz.
I was just going to say that we are so, as a community committee team, to support you all, we are so open to promoting these meetings and getting more and more people involved. So if you've got groups that you want us to or social media sites that you want us to share the links with, then tell us. We are absolutely wanting to support you all about making sure that the reach of the committee is as far as it possibly can be.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cohen.
I apologise, Chair. I am going to have to shoot off because the meeting room
No,
is...
that's okay. That's fine.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Right, so I think we're actually done. So we've done quite well to get done for 6:30 to release the All Woodley councillors to go and do their packed meeting. Hopefully the Harewood members will be able to sort out the issues with the police, and that will help with that. So I suppose it only remains for me to say that we're happy with the Preet's report and we're supportive of any of the recommendations that are in there. Nobody's got any issues. No, thank you very much. So the final item is the date and time of the next meeting is Monday, the 22nd of March. Wow, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. That's a scary thought. So I'll take the opportunity to say that I hope that everybody on the call and anybody who's actually watching on the webcam, even this evening or afterwards, that I hope that you have a good Christmas and a happier new year, and as good as we can get it during these COVID restrictions. So thank you very much for your attendance and contributions. And